Matan Yaffe is one of the founders of Adegil, a political movement here in Israel. He is a reservist that has done hundreds and hundreds of days of military service since October 7th. But a few years back, he was a social entrepreneur, the founder of Desert Stars, which is an amazing program to develop leadership amongst the Bedouin community. And in that hat, he went to Harvard. Welcome, Matan.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here. Now, Matan, I know your story, but I wanted everybody else to understand what you went through. You are a dynamic, young social entrepreneur, founder of an organization that is empowering the Bedouin community, and you get to go to Harvard.
Yeah, correct. Basically, I established and led Desert Stars as the CEO for about a decade, which grew to become the largest organization working with the Bedouins in the Negev, so quite big, over 100 employees, etc. And then when at the end of my time there, I decided I want kind of a year off before the next big thing, and I applied to the Wexner program and to Harvard.
What year was that, Matan?
2022.
Okay, so this was before October 7th.
Before October 7th.
Okay, so 2022, you apply like many young social entrepreneurs and political leaders and other people in Israel to the Wexner program, which is taking mid-level Israeli leaders to Harvard for a year. I did the short version of that with another program, and I was in the Kennedy School for a couple of weeks. But you went for a whole year. Okay,
Correct.
So you're an Israeli. You've never lived outside of Israel. You get to Harvard. You've done some good things in your life. Tell us about that experience.
So, I think that the general experience was amazing.
Yeah.
I have 5 boys, Nevo, Negev, Arbel, Tavor, and Sinai.
You all moved.
All of
you,
us.
your wife, and 5 boys.
Exactly.
You moved to Harvard.
Yeah. So the general experience in that sense was amazing, and everything was great. I will say that as an entrepreneur, I'm very practical. So I don't like to do theoretical work.
Right.
So all the assignments in all the courses I took were always on Israel. I'm
Of course.
a Zionist. I wanted to build the next project.
Okay.
So everything was on that. And in one of the courses in the winter semester, kind of midway, I presented together with 2 other friends the topic of the work, of the assignment we want to do. And the professor was at first excited about it and said, yeah, that's great. And then to our surprise, at the end, it was a very packed course, like 2 full weekends. So a whole day, the professor is happy. At the end of the day, we get an email saying, please come to my office as soon as possible.
Okay.
We said, all right, we came.
What was the class that you were taking?
It was about organizing people.
Okay.
Community organizing.
Community organizing. Okay.
Yeah.
So you go to his office.
We go to his office and he says, well, guys, you need to change the topic for your site.
What was the topic?
Making Israel kind of vibrant, liberal, democratic, Jewish state. Maybe it was something about, I can't remember the exact
Jewish
word.
and democratic.
Jewish and democratic. That was the point.
That was the point. Okay.
Jewish and democratic.
And what does he tell you?
So he tells us, you need to change the topic for your assignments. And we say, why? How come? And he said, well, we can't support here in the Kennedy School in states that prioritize gender, ethnicity, religion, etc. And I told him,
What do you mean? Sorry, let's go back. He says to you, you can't talk about a Jewish state being democratic.
Exactly.
You
For
can't
him,
say
the
Jewish and
combination
democratic.
of Jewish democratic.
Okay.
So I want to say it's not for him. It's because at first he was excited. I met him twice before the course started, and he actually worked with me shoulder to shoulder. But at the end of the first day, suddenly something has changed. Now you have to understand, I'm Israeli. I was born here, 5th generation. For me, anti-Semitism was something that I heard that exists.
You read in the books.
Exactly. It
You
wasn't
never
something
actually.
I felt.
Of course, because you're a majority in your country. So you get there. Okay, so he takes you to his office and he says what?
So he says, you need to change the topic. We can't support states that prioritize ethnicity, religion, etc.
Like 80% of the world.
So not 80, 48%. I opened Google. I actually looked it up. I told him, 48% of the world define themselves according to religion or whatever. By the way, 100% of the Muslim nation,
Of course.
all of sit here in your class.
Yes.
And he said, well, it's not the same. And I told him, of course it's not the same. It's anti-Semitism. He told us, Jewish state is like white supremacy. It's
He
exactly.
said that to you.
He said in his own
That the
words.
Jewish state is white supremacy. Meanwhile, there's 22 Muslim nations that call themselves Muslim nations. Nobody has a problem with it. There's another, 30 Christian states that call themselves Christians. Nobody seems to have a problem with that.
Everything is
The
fine.
one Jewish state in the world is a problem for this Harvard professor.
Absolutely. Who is Jewish, by the way.
Of course he is, yes.
And we kind of try, we at first we came naive, we were not young already. You said young, which is a compliment, but
Well, yeah, but you have 5 kids, you're married, you've done
Exactly.
something in your life.
Exactly. So we came and we were kind of relaxed about it, and we told him, wait, this is the academy. If someone has a problem with that, we invite a conversation,
In academia, we should argue.
Exactly. So if someone wants to kind of better understand, we're more than happy to engage in a conversation. And he said, no, it's not about that. You just need to change the topic. We basically, I won't say it kind of online, but we told him, look, it's not going to happen. We went home, and then miraculously, he actually sent us an email saying, if you won't change your topic, it'll have consequences.
So he put it in writing.
Absolutely.
He put it in writing. He put his discrimination, self-hatred, or anti-Semitism, whatever you want to call it, in writing, telling you that as Israel, you cannot talk about the Jewish democratic state.
Exactly. And we kind of, I asked question like, what kind of consequences and why come? And we kind of pulled him to kind of put everything in writing, which he did, fortunately. I will say that to the rest of the course, all the TAs, the teacher assistants that presented kind of something, activity we need to do, at least half of it was about Palestine.
Of course.
So a TA talked about, his friend in Lebanon or a friend in Gaza, etc., etc. We never got to present in front of the class our work, even though we asked multiple times. Everyone presented apart from us. At some point, I came up to him and I told him, look, everyone presented already. We didn't. And he said, enough, you caused enough damage. Sit down. And we're very cool about it. And the kind of the top of it was that at the end, at the final day, obviously it became an issue in the class, about 200 students. At the final day, at the end of the course, a student, they take a picture, all the student and the professor. A student brought like 50 kafiyas and gave them away to people. He put one on.
And nobody had a problem with that.
Nobody had a problem with that.
That's ridiculous.
No, we came out of it, kind of thinking, look, we really, it didn't move anything internal in me. I have, my identity is Israeli, Zionist. I have, like you said, anchors, kids, etc. But I understood that had I been an 18-year-old American,
of course,
that for them, Harvard, for me, Harvard was a way to get my family a year off in America. That was it. For them, it's their life story.
Yes.
And if he would do that to them...
They do.
They do. You're right. They do all the time.
This is what happens at Harvard. And this is why Jews are going less and less to Harvard. And it's happening with the blessing of the administration. And I always say the problem with Jewish kids, they go into these Ivy Leagues and they're given a choice. You can either be pro-human rights or pro-Israel. You can't be both. And like you said, you're a confident Israeli man. You've done the army. You've got your life in Israel. What happens to one of these kids?
You're absolutely right. And I will tell you that, when it happened, I came, I wanted to be kind of mild about it and see, I thought to myself, let's be curious. And I started speaking to people, including professors in Harvard. And the one professor who I love the most, but I won't put his name here to not embarrass him, told me, Israel is very unique. It's the only state in the world that if you hate their administration, you think the country doesn't have the right to exist.
Exactly.
No one, I remind you, 2022, Russia, Ukraine, that's kind of the peak of it. No one says Russia doesn't have the right to exist.
Absolutely.
They say Putin is bad.
They don't even say Afghanistan doesn't have the right to exist and they're under the Taliban, for God's sake.
And in Israel, the illogical jump between I don't like what the administration is doing and the state doesn't have the right to exist is immediate.
Is anti-Semitism.
That's
anti-Semitism. And so, Matan, at what point did you think to yourself, this is anti-Semitism from the beginning?
From the first second, when he said, white supremacy, it's so blunt. So at the moment he said that, we said, the only thing is different. We asked him, you're a professor here for 40 years. Have you ever asked students to change the topic of their assignment? Like how crazy it is. It's academy. And he said no. So we told him, don't you think it's a bit bizarre that suddenly you ask that?
And?
So he said, yeah, but we understood that behind the scene, apparently some of his TAs and the students,
They were the ones
they were the one
pressurizing.
pushing
He's
it.
obviously
And
somebody.
he caved in.
He's somebody with no backbone. So what happened, Matan? You then went and sued Harvard.
So we then went to the Brandeis Center, who kind of deal with these kind of things, and reached out to them and started work with them, and we sent Harvard a letter, and they started external investigation with
External.
Yeah.
They investigated the professor and
everyone, us as well. They wanted to understand what happened, and they wrote this, super long report, like often happen. But eventually, the investigator said that there was a violation of Title 6, and the atmosphere was one that is not welcoming, etc., etc. And that kind of led us to be able to say, all right, now we want impact. When the Brandeis asked us, what do we want? We told them we want one thing. We want impact. We want to change
results,
this reality, in order for that to not happen to an 18-year-old.
So you're not looking for money. You're not looking for compensation. You're looking for something to change.
Exactly. I wanted to change reality. I'm an entrepreneur. That's what I like to do.
But this was in 2022, Matan, and all we see are things getting worse.
You're right. So since then, basically, there was a discussion with Harvard throughout time. We didn't speak only about the Kennedy School. We spoke about the system that must change. And eventually, 5 months ago, we signed a settlement with Harvard that kind of the core of it is them adopting the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism.
That's a good result.
It's a good result mainly because once Harvard is doing that, that becomes the benchmark for all the other universities.
Yes, but they really adopted the IHRA definition? It means you can't criticize Israel's right to exist, which is what they do all the time when they shout from the river to the sea.
You're right. So here it's where it's become interesting. Because for me, nice declarations count for nothing. It doesn't matter. So even if supposedly, I don't know what the true intention is, but supposedly there is a good intention. If reality doesn't change, then nothing has happened.
Right.
And in that sense, from that point onward, so there's, a bunch of things that they must do. Some of them are kind of publicly declare some things, and some of them are sending their the staff to all kind of training against anti-Semitism.
So staff sensitivity training and all that. What have they actually done?
So some of it is going on. It's not as what I would like to see, but more than that, the general atmosphere that was there and allowed that to happen, as much as I see, is still there. Absolutely. And even more so. And here I also want to use this platform to say that I want evidence for violations of the IHRA policy. So I'm trying to gather as many violations as possible, not because I'm bad and I'm looking for anything. I just want to make sure that the change is real and not just declared, and reality is still very anti-Semitic environment.
But so let's say that you have an email and you can tell us what it is, and you want to hear from Harvard students that are being discriminated for national origin, which is Title 6. What are you going to do with those complaints?
So, because we have in the settlement, there's an obvious obligation on their side to use the IHRA definition, and use is not a theoretical term. It's a practical term. For me, reality must change according to the IHRA definition, and exactly like they would deal with any other racist incident.
National origin is Title 6.
Exactly, against any other nationality or whatever. I want to just be equal to that.
Right.
I want them to not allow a student to go up on the stage on official ceremony in Harvard, happened in May after the settlement was signed, wearing Palestinian flag and a kafia, and speaking about how terrible Israel is. Now, in the sense of freedom of speech, can that student do that? Of course she can. Freedom of speech. Can she do it on an official event of the Harvard University when professors are standing and sharing the stage with her? Imagine I would go on the stage with an Israeli flag and say, about Hamas and Gaza, etc., etc., etc.
They'd lynch you.
Can you imagine that someone wouldn't pull out the mic?
Of course.
Of course it would happen.
But it's happening, Matan. So what you've experienced, which was before October 7th, is actually worse now much worse after October 7th. And so, people can write to you, and then what are you going to do? Say to them, you violated this agreement?
That's I want them to know that we're constantly looking. Now, if there's a settlement, they are obliged to fulfill, and if they don't fulfill, then
they've broken the settlement.
They've broken it.
So you're trying to prove that they've broken that settlement.
No, I'm trying to create a real impact, and I want
You're trying to
settlement to be fulfilled letter to letter. I don't want this settlement to be broken. I want it to be fulfilled in practicality and not just in empty words. So, we spoke to the dean 2 weeks ago, and he's very nice. And everyone are generally nice. But for me, again, as an entrepreneur, ideas that don't come to life are meaningless. I want a change in reality, and I need the public help in order to make sure that it's happening. We should not look. Can Israel be better? Of course it can. Like any other state, everyone should be better. But we need to fight anti-Semitism as if Israel is the most perfect place on earth, because it has nothing to do. And many people with self-blame say, but it's us. It's not us. It's not on us.
A lot of Israelis, my contention is Israelis don't understand anti-Semitism. And a lot of Israelis, especially on the left, think it's our fault. That's how badly they don't understand it. They kind of look in the mirror and they're like, well, if only we didn't have Bibi, there wouldn't be anti-Semitism. Come on. It's been 2,500 years of anti-Semitism, and it's not about Bibi. It's about the fact that there's double standards, which is part of how legitimate criticism of Israel goes into anti-Semitism. It's the 3 Ds of Natan Sharansky. Delegitimization, like you said, doesn't have the right to exist because you don't agree with our policies. Demonization, you're killing babies in Gaza. Matan, you were in Gaza. Do Israeli soldiers kill babies?
No, it's so far out from
reality. Exactly. And the third is double standards. Yeah. In other words, like you said to your professor, 48 states are ethno-democracies. 48%. Why are you picking 48%? Why are you picking on ours, the only Jewish state in the world?
Absolutely. So I think, look, for me, first, it was a realization. I admit, 5th generation, Tzabar, grew up here. So the whole concept seemed ridiculous because I said, who can imagine this kind of behavior?
Yes.
So for me, it was kind of eyes opening. And I think that all in all, we, the Israelis, we need to be much more conscious and aware of what's happening in the diaspora because we simply don't understand.
I totally agree.
There's a birthright. People come here. I always say we need to do a
reverse birthright. People talk about that all the time, and I think it's correct. I don't think Israelis actually do understand the diaspora.
Not them, and also not the government. We see that the government is not busy in being the best place on earth for every Jewish people. They, particularly in the past 20 years, they bring all kind of topics of religion. Conservative, no. Ultra-Orthodox, yes. Why? This is the Jewish state. It belongs to every Jew in the world. And if not every Jewish person in the world will find it as the best place, Israel will not be able to survive.
Or at least their home. They should find it as their home.
They don't need to live here, but they need
to feel that affinity.
That they are proud in this place, etc. So you and I on different hats are working to make Israel much, much better than what it is today. And it's a necessity. It's critical.
I think the necessity is definitely a stronger connection with the diaspora, a stronger mutual understanding of our reality here and their reality there. And I think that if anything, you can say anything positive about October 7th, is that I think the communities have become closer because of what's happening outside of Israel, because of the reaction, the disgusting reaction of so many people to October 7th.
But I want to tell you that also in this, October 7th created opportunities to also do exactly what you said and unite and build a narrative. And still we see a vacuum of leadership that does not step up actually do what needs to be done in order to communicate to the Jews in the world and to the world in general. You see a vacuum that people like yourself are feeling it. So
you're not going to find a bigger critic of the fact that we have no strategy, no communication strategy.
We don't have any strategy.
Nothing. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
Our strategy is to turn off fires as they go.
Exactly. And and that's something that we're all fighting. And hopefully that's something that we can change in the future, because the information war is the third world war right now. We're already in it. We're not even in the arena. And I truly believe that.
Yesterday, I started now another cycle of Miluim to kind of...
What do you do in Miluim? You're a major?
I'm a major in the commando brigade.
Wow.
So yeah. So,
You going back into Gaza?
yes.
Well, Matan, we want to bless you for all the incredible work that you do fighting our enemies. You are, like you said, a father of 5, a social entrepreneur, now a political leader, and you really are the best that we have. And yet, when you are abroad, you're seen as you had that horrible experience because you're Israeli.
Yeah,
and that's the bottom line.
Exactly. And I think that, Ben Gurion said it. We need to fight the white book as if there's no Nazis, and the Nazis as if there's no white book. And we need to now modernize this sentence. We need to fight anti-Semitism as if Israel is perfect, and fight to make Israel perfect as if the world is normal. I will tell you that regarding what you said. So yesterday, when we started, kind of all the officers starting building the next mission, then someone said, we have 7 fronts that we're fighting at. And I told him we have 8.
8. Absolutely right.
And we need to acknowledge it. And by the way, this 8 front, in Harvard, I took an Arabic class.
Yeah.
All the textbooks, all the texts, Fleur, all of them are on Palestine.
Of course.
At some point,
nothing else exists. Nothing else exists.
No other stories to tell about?
Nothing.
But they have been working.
Oh, yes.
And we've
been sleeping.
We been sleeping. We didn't we didn't build the infrastructure needed. And we could have, because you have the best brains in the world here.
And we're good storytellers, Jews.
Had you taken them and unite them and tell them, look, we have a mission. Yeah. The Zionism is not over. It barely started.
Right.
We need to make sure that we have, a safe and prosperous home here in the state of Israel. And we must build it. Part of it is to build the infrastructure and harness the people to work together in order to tell our story.
Absolutely.
But we don't have a story now, and we don't have a strategy, and we don't have the right leadership to connect us together. And then you see chaos all around. So people like yourself are doing, miracles in explaining, but it's not enough. You're fighting a much larger enemy.
Drop in the bucket with a very resourced other side, funded by Qatar, Iran, China, and all sorts of other
But your viewers and your listeners can help us. They can help us externally build the system needed in order to make sure that we win all of our enemies.
I agree with you, Matan. If somebody now wants to get in touch with you in order to bring the complaints or their terrible discrimination that they're suffering in Harvard so that you can, build up your case more, is there an email they should write you? Should they find you on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm on all the network, Matan Yaffe with double F.
Double F-E.
WFE, matanyaffe@gmail.com, whatever, just reach out. WhatsApp is the easiest. So I'm super available, and I prioritize this, and we together, alongside with other people, we want to put this in first priority because we understand that this is crucial in the strategical level for the existence of Israel.
Absolutely crucial, and it should be part of our national security doctrine, and hopefully we can make that change together. Matan Yaffe, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Fleur. Amazing.